So I apologize if you're listening to this lecture. It was because my wife had a medical appointment and we had a medical emergency, and I wasn't able to come back to class in time. So I record the lecture in case that happened. So again, I apologize if that happened. Uh, so here we're going to talk about the four in this class, four main things. In the beginning, I will give you some announcements. In particular, we're going to talk about the zoo trip, and if you have any questions later, I will answer it. Then I will give you a brief recap of the previous class. Then we're going to move into the next section, that is the lecture and the quiz of this class. And then, if we have time, we will have an in-class discussion about conspiracy theories. So let's start talking about the zoo trip. And later we will talk also about how to flag questions and why this is important, yeah, and how to do it on Moodle. The zoo trip will be in November 29. Then on Moodle you will find the information. The idea is that we arrive to the zoo a little bit earlier, so you can leave a little bit earlier, and we start making groups so everybody can leave start right away, and you can go and see all the there will be guides similar to a nature walk, and each guide is going to show you the importance of conservation, and it's going to talk about the different animals in the zoo and the importance of the conservation of those animals. Again, it will be this date. If you find November 28th, it was because it was the one from last year. We will meet here in the main entrance of the zoo, and it will be from 1 to 2:15. If you want to stay longer, you can stay longer. So, as an attendance, I want that you send me a picture of you in the zoo. Yeah. So it was a great picture, for example, in the zoo, and in that way, you later upload it on Moodle, and you show me that you were there. So we finished for the announcement. So if you have questions about the zoo trip, please let me know. I will repeat that information the day before going to the zoo, or the class before to go and that we go to the zoo. Now I'm going to give you a brief recap of what we did last time. So we talk about what is the scientific method, and is the scientific method, remember, is a process to objectively establish fact, and how we do it through experimentation. And we talk about what are the steps, and we talk that at least there are 6 steps, and here we talk about each one of the steps. And in particular, the most important is not only to report the students, but to communicate those findings to the society. So the science communication, communicating that to the society is very important. We also talk about the butterflies, how they travel, the monarch butterfly, how they travel, migrate to Mexico and come back again to Winnipeg and different parts of Canada. And we just try to make hypotheses about how this process happened. I just wanted that you know how to make a hypothesis. And the most important, that the hypothesis need to be testable. Here, another important part of your hypothesis is that generally they have to have, if this happened, then you will make a prediction. There are multiple ways to write a hypothesis, but generally a good hypothesis is like, if this is true, then this will happen. Why? Because if this is true, then I will see a response of something that I can measure. Okay, so remember, a hypothesis is an explanation of a set of observation, generally followed by this, by if something, then it will happen. So, for example, if a first year student start attending to more lectures, then their exams scores will improve. So that is something very easy to measure. So I can compare the different students, how many classes attend, and try to see the difference, for example, of a student that attend to 2 classes in all the semester versus somebody that attend to all the classes, and start comparing those things. And I can start quantifying the grades and quantifying how many classes. so it can help me to understand what is happening. If you sleep, if you at least sleep 6 hours, then you will do better on tests than if you sleep less. Again, super easy. I can check the students. If we were doing an experiment of this, we can take students and ask them to sleep 4 hours, 3 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, and then ask them to take a test and see which people did better. This one is very easy. If a drop ball, if you drop a ball, then it will fall toward the ground. Same thing, yeah. You can actually measure all those things and see a clear response, and this is a good hypothesis in the scientific world. And you can keep making all this one. If something, then something happens. Then we talk about pseudoscience and science, and we told you that pseudoscience always uh, tell you something that you actually want to believe, yeah, something that is not based on evidence, while uh, science is based on facts, on multiple studies, and it can change, depend based on proven evidence, while pseudoscience is just tell you what you really want to know, what you want to hear, yeah, and like an echo of your own misconceptions. Then we talk about parsimony, and then if you remember, I give you an example of the zebra and the horse. So, what is more likely that happen if you're in Winnipeg or in Texas? When you hear a sound of hoof beats, yeah. So the most likely is that it will be a horse, yeah, because we are not in Africa, and the zebras are located in Africa. So remember, parsimony is that hypothesis, science, conclusions is the more likely are things that require less assumptions. Yeah, so the fewest assumption is the more parsimonious response. So something that I didn't talk in the class, it was about model organisms, and this information you can find it in the Campbell biology. I add the readings of that on Moodle, and if you want to get a plus in the course, you can read more about this. If you have some doubts about this topic, highly recommend. If you want to get ready for the test, I think this is a great way to do it. So uh, just to summarize, and you can read that more this topic about model organisms in the Campbell biology, but the idea that we have a specific organisms that we have studied in a long time and for a long time, that they have something in common. Yeah, if you see fruit flies, you have fruit flies in your house, and it's very difficult to get rid of them. Yeah, mice, you have infections of mice everywhere. They reproduce very easily, very fast, and they have big populations. So those characteristics are perfect for research. Why? Because you need to have them in a small space, and you need that they reproduce well, and in that way they are not very expensive, and you can move very fast in research. So for example, to study cancer in human, besides the ethical implication, let's forget that any ethical implication, and we are doing research on cancer on humans, it will be very difficult because it will to develop a cancer, yeah, to a cancer to progress in a human, and to have these big tumors, it will take decades. Yeah, in fruit flies, for example, we can work, and in 2 weeks we can have flies with tumors, and we can start testing medications. Yeah, and say like, okay, medication A worked, medication B didn't work. Yeah, so we know. So in other words, moral organisms are species that have been widely studied, that they are also easy to maintain and breed in laboratory settings, and that they are very easy to manipulate in the lab. Yeah, so I can modify a gene of a fruit fly, and and try to see if I can repair the cancer that fly has. I can put a specific chemical and see which one worked better, and then I start working also with mice in zebrafish, or yeah, in different fish. Then in that way, in a much shorter time, I can start having a medication, a drug that can help humans. Okay, so model organisms are a very important tool for research because are organisms that help us to study different phenomena, different process, biological questions, and and uh, and they speed up a lot of the work of scientists. So I already told you about the announcements of the zoo trip that you have to go on November 29, and we will meet there. Arrive 15 minutes before the class, and you need to take a picture, a selfie, and upload it, and this will be the attendance. I already give a brief recap about the scientific method, and I told you that very important that you go if you want to study this in more detail for the test. Go and read the Campbell biology, and there are topics that I didn't cover in the class, like model organisms that I covered very briefly, and there you can learn more about them. Now I'm going to move into the lecture and the quiz, and I'm going to talk about disturbance, dispersal, and endemism. And we already talked about in very briefly about disturbance and dispersal. Now I'm going to go and talk a little bit more in detail. And I'm going to also answer questions of the quiz. So, and the class will be divided in three main sections. We will talk about disturbance, and you already had to watch a video about succession. So we're going to answer some questions about succession that they will be in the quiz. Also, I'm going to show you a video about endemism that I found fascinating. This biological phenomena that if you see here, you have a nail of a human, and look, this very tiny reptile. And on the other hand, this looked like from a scary movie, from a horror movie, that you have giant insects. And so, how this happened? Yeah, so why this process happened? At 3, we will talk about categories of life. We will talk about the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, autotroph and heterotroph, animal, plants, and fungi. And all this, they, they are just topics from high school that and we want that you review just you're ready to understand the next topics of the class. So again, we are going to talk about something about these phylogenetic trees, and we have three main domains that are prokaryotes, and these will be eukaryotes. So this is pretty basic, but we just want to make sure that you understand this to move into more complicated topics. And so let's start with the disturbance, and we are going to start answering some questions that I'm sure that you already know the answer because you watched the video. So in this wonderful video that summarize all the idea of ecological succession, and it give you even more information in a very simple in 10 minutes. This will help if you like ecology. I hope that you enjoyed that video, and you can use that also for your nature journal. So you will see successions uh, during from fall into winter, yeah, in the Assiniboia forest. Why? Because some animals, the plants and animals will start changing because of the change in temperature. So here you can see the picture that we talked last time. Yeah, last time we talked about pioneer species, we had talked about intermediate species, and we talked about this climax community. And here, in this case, we are already start talking about a more specific name of some species. So, for example, here you can say that pioneer species will be in the beginning different type of grasses, yeah, or these annual plants that are very short and very small that they try to reproduce very quick and they grow very fast. So they are just invading that and growing, taking advantage of the natural resources as soon as possible. However, in the long term, those one will be replaced by shrubs and then by softwood trees, yeah, and that they start becoming also taller. So here you will see the you start creating like a three dimension in the ecosystem. Well, here the animals will hide here. The yeah, the birds are only going to be eating sit here. here you are going to have one layer here, another layer here, so the squirrels can go here, birds can be here, and they can also go here. Yeah, so you start creating like a three-dimension, and the ecosystem become more and more complex. And finally, in the climax community, that you have these hardwood trees. Yeah, and these can take, how long it can take depend on the ecosystem. Yeah, so for example, here in the Assiniboia forest, uh, there are some plants, there are some regions that the annual plants will disappear during winter. Yeah, the snow will cover that area, but they will come back in summer very easily. However, the ones that are in the climax community, they will be there, except if there is a fire or an infection or something of somebody can that climax community. And in theory, if there was no disturbance, the uh, in the long term, decades or hundreds of years, these won't disappear. Will the intermediate, and they will be replaced by the climax community. So remember, succession refer to this directional, predictable change in a community. Last time I told you there are very few rules that are universal in ecology. Yeah, they sometimes are difficult to find those rules because they there are so many factors affecting. However, this one, if there is a rules, this one could be one of the rules that over time you will find a directional, predictable change in a community. Um, and this change is due to the shift in the presence and relative abundance of different species. So here the plants are the easiest species to see the difference, but as I told you, this will change. For example, let's talk about microorganisms. So let's talk about the soil. If you are interested in microbiology, I recommend you to take the course with John Brubaker. It's such a great course. So, but I wonder you think about this. So, what will be the difference in the soil here, yeah, versus the soil here, yeah? So they will be big difference, yeah. This will require more water, but this one will require water faster. These the plants that live there, but they will require less. In addition to that, this will change and create a change in the environment of the ecosystem. So the microorganisms that they will live there, they will be very different. And John Brubaker in his class here in microbiology, he's taking samples there and try to see the difference between different regions, different microenvironments in different regions of the Assiniboia forest, and trying to see if there is a potential for antibiotic resistance. Okay, so highly recommended that course. And that was just an example of how not only the plants, the animals and microbes and different organisms that live there will also be changing. So based on what we said, I wanted what you learned in the video and in this lecture, I wanted you to tell me to answer this question. In a succession of plant communities, the climax communities are generally characterized by, first, oak trees, two, species that are better competitors for scarce resources, C, species that can survive the winter, D, species with numerous widely dispersed seeds, and E, all the species characterized of the climax community. So here they are giving you an A, they're going to give you a very specific example. But here they're talking about they are telling you in a succession of plant communities. They are not telling you in the succession of plant communities of the Assiniboia forest. They are not saying if, for example, if there is a succession of plant communities, I don't know, in South America, you are also going to find the same trees. So this is too specific for this question. It could be true if you had a Assiniboia forest, but for this one, is not good. The species that survive during winter, also this is not correct. The species with numerous widely spread seeds, actually, uh, This is not always true, and this is not the main idea of a climax community. And all these options characterize, all these options are characteristics of climax communities. No. So the best answer will be B. So B is climax communities in a succession are species that are better competitors for scarce resources. So this is why they end up outcompeting in the long term all the other species, and they become an unstable community that it will only disappear uh, if there is a disturbance. But let's talk a little bit more about this. So what I have been showing you in so far is climax communities similar to the Assiniboia forest, but you can think about other different ecosystems. So here, for example, when there's a volcano, yeah, something very interesting happens. So this is what they describe in your textbook. Yeah, that when there's a volcanic eruption, it destroys everything. However, now the soil become very fertile. There's a lot of nutrients there. So the first thing that after it cool down, they will be different type of organisms. Yeah, non-vascular. Yeah, no, that they don't have. There is no trees. There is no these new plants that have these vascular tissues like lichens. Yeah, and moss. That if you are interested in understanding more about all this diversity in diversity of life, Rachel will talk about what are lichens and moss. They are these photosynthetic entities that look like pieces of rocks that attach to exactly to rocks. Those one will start creating a layer that it will become something like a soil, and then you will start seeing that after these pioneers plants appear, yeah, then other type of grasses will start growing, and later all the succession will start taking place. And here you can see, not from a schematic, here in the left, from a volcanic eruption, and how after many years you can see that the ecosystem, oh sorry, it goes like this. In 1950, and later you can see how slowly it start recovering. Yeah, and if there is again another volcanic eruption, something similar will happen. Okay, and why we know that? Because we have been tracking volcanoes and how this had happened multiple times, and every single time this kind of succession take place. So in addition to the succession of the one that we saw in the Assiniboia forest or the schematic that I show you, I'm going to show you that different ecosystems have different successions. Yeah, and but the climax community, they are going to have always the one that take advantage in the best way of the resources. So this is an example of a very Canadian example, that here you have a glacier. Yeah, so a glacier, um, everything winter is over. Yeah, no more snow. So what is going to happen? You're going to have again lichens, yeah, start colonizing the rocks. Most start colonizing the rock. They start creating organic material, so they start creating the first very simple soils, and then after that grasses will start coming here. So you can see here some type of grasses. So from a something that it was rock, you start creating some green areas that they will start forming the soil that will allow later in the next section to form grass. And later you will start having deeper soils, yeah, that hold more water. And then if there is more water, you are going to have a other type of vegetation, and now you will have shrubs here. And as you have longer roots here, they are not as superficial as the grass. You're going to have more availability of resources, of nutrient resources. And later, eventually, you will have the climax community. Yeah, um, that is the one that is better adapted. So I show you that there are different communities. Yeah, so different ecosystem. I show you that volcanoes, yeah, although they are very different, they will have different species. They show the same and the similar species in terms of that there are some pioneers, some intermediate, and some climax community. And the same thing happened with glaciers. Now I'm going to show you with sand dunes. So here again, you have pioneer species here. They start growing, yeah. That they start growing in the sand. They start forming a type of soil, and later you start isolating some regions. So there is less wind that will move the sand. It will start destroying the vegetation until you start getting these scrubs and woodland. Yeah, so you start moving into this. Yeah, so here again the plants are very different. Yeah, the climax community is not going to be oak trees here. It's going to be something completely different that can survive the saline environment sometimes of the sea. Yeah, so they will be different. But if you see again, you find pioneer species, intermediate species, and there is a directional movement to a particular to particular species that it will form the climax community. So again, and I repeat it, succession refers to a directional and predictable change in a community, and this community structure, and this will happen over time. Yeah, it will not happen in one day. It could happen in months, weeks, years. Yeah, it could change. So I already showed you different type of succession communities. Now I'm going to focus on what is a climax community. So in that way you can understand better this answer. So we already talked about plant communities and succession. And I told you that, look, the third stage, yeah, it will be the climax community, and this community, the feature of this community is that it's stable. And why is stable? Because it's the one that is able to take advantage of the nutrients of the resources in the best way. Why? Because, for example, here the roots are deeper, they are taller, so they have, for example, more sunlight than other ones. So they will take most of the resources of that, and uh, they know how to survive in that environment under those circumstances. So if there is no dramatic changes in the temperature, if there is not a fire or something like that, that community will continue there in an stable way, while the other ones will be replaced. So remember, climax communities are the only one of this one that is a stable community, and they are the final stage of this biotic succession, and it will remain like that under those conditions. Yeah. So here you can see two type of climax community. Yeah. So why I show you this picture? Because if you're in a desert, yeah, you can have cacti here. Yeah, these ones that are very tall, different type of plants, different kinds type of shrubs. Yeah, and that will be the climax community. While if you're in another type of forest, yeah, your climax community plants will be very different. So yes, a climax community in both cases, that will be the final stage. That will be the stable community, and if there is no disturbance, they will remain the same. However, the type of climax community will vary depending on the ecosystem. It's very different the plants that will be in the climax community of a desert or a tropical rainforest, okay? As is shown here. Both are climax community, but both are different ecosystems. And here there is a different terminology. Yeah, you will talk more about this maybe in ecology. So for example, you have primary and secondary succession. So I told you about pioneer species, intermediate species, and also a climax community at the end. There are terminology and other ways to define a succession, so like primary and secondary successions. But all of them, again, the same they will end up with a climax community. So I hope that this question now is clear. So in a succession of black communities, climax communities are generally characterized not for being a specific type of trees or plants. Look here, this desert is the climax community, and it doesn't have all those things. And we already talked about all these different answers, and you see that, for example, in the desert, these plants, the cacti and those shrubs are the best one, those resources from the environment and are able to survive. And this is why they are stable, and this is why they are the climax community. Okay, now we're going to answer these questions. So please read it with me. Which of the following statements about disturbance? So you're going to have, I highlight these statements about disturbance in natural ecosystems are true. So please, A will say disturbers are uncommon. Yeah, and here, just if you can, when in the previous class we say that in nature it's very common to have disturbance. So for example, winter is very common and it creates a disturbance. And fires, natural fires are also common during summer. Maybe the magnitude right now because of climate change has been increasing, but just from here, from disturbance are uncommon, that you know this one is false. Um, and here, if you keep reading, you will see that there is something also wrong. When they occur, they are always very beneficial for the species living in the disturbed ecosystem. So right away, you know that A is incorrect. Now you can go to B. Disturbance are always caused by natural disasters such as fire, flood, hurricanes, and volcano. We talk that they could be other disturbance like biological components. So for example, um, if we don't find a vaccine for COVID, yeah, this can create even a higher disturbance, yeah, in our life, yeah. The communities could have changed, yeah, if there was a horror movie that many more people died, millions of people died. And let's go far away from the examples of humans. There are right now frogs are under a lot of pressure because there is a fungus that is killing many of them, yeah, and it's changing the structure of ecosystem because frogs are it's changing those ecosystem because frogs are not eating anymore the mosquitoes, so the ecosystem is changing. So right away, disturbances are not always caused by these ones. C, disturbance by me due may be due to biological causes such as virulent disease that wipe out entire species that previously dominates in this ecosystem. So it's exactly what I told you about the fungus that is killing the frogs. So this one will be incorrect. This one is a good option. And the disturbance is only negative. Positive disturbance in ecology are referred to as succession. So this is wrong. You know that this is wrong. The disturbance could have positive and negative aspects, yeah, and depending on how big the disturbance it is. And E, all are true is false. So the best answer will be C. Yeah, so pretty easy. Let me remind you something. If so, you went to the previous class. Here we talk about that disturbance are an ecosystem is our ecosystem process that they affect the structure function of ecosystems, and we talked that there are many types. There are many natural disturbance, but I told you that also you can have viruses and biotic process, you know, pathogens that can affect that. And these disturbance can change the ecology and the soil and the hydrology of that ecosystem. Yeah, so I told you that, for example, a fire is going to change the amount of water that is located in that ecosystem. Yeah, it's going to dry the the humidity of that ecosystem. Yeah, however, it's going to also release some nutrients. Yeah, some nitrogen there. And definitely they play a significant role shaping the structural ecosystem. And remember, they are part of nature. Some of them they occur because and they are important to regulate the ecosystems. Yeah, some ecosystems like the ones that are located in winter. Some plants in winter they are regulated by winter. Yeah, so if we don't have winter, if we bring those plants from, and this had happened multiple times, if we take some plants from Canada or from Europe and put it in tropical countries, they will grow and grow and grow without stopping, and they can destroy other ecosystems. So disturbances are part of nature, and depending on the degree, they can have more positive or negative consequence. So this is pretty easy. C will be the answer. So with this, we finish the disturbance section. Now we're going to talk about this pretty cool uh, topic that is the endemism, and I'm going to start doing that to show you a video, and later we will answer some questions.
Some animal species are found in almost every corner of the world. We humans are generalists, for example, using our big brains to find ways to live in lots of different environments. But other animals are isolated from their relatives on islands and mountaintops or tucked away in deep caves. And when a species lives in only one place, whether it's a single lake or a whole continent, we say it's endemic to that area. Over time, these animals can develop special adaptations to their unique habitats, and these 8 have done just that. Each one lives in a very specific spot, and it's really, really good at living there.
So as they describe in the video, an endemic species are species that are native or only found in a particular place, and they are very common on islands, and they are more sensitive to shrinking population. Why? Because they have fewer populations. So for example, if one of those species that live in an island, there's a pathogen that evolved in that area or colonize that area, as they are less number and there's a small population, all of them, if many of them get infected and only a few of them survive, it will be more difficult that they replenish, that they come back to normal numbers, or it will take longer than if there are many animals or there are many organisms that are widespread in different regions, because those animals can migrate, they can be genetic recombination, yeah. So you are not going to have only the same genes that in the long term is bad. So we will talk about how populations size are very important in ecology, yeah. So with 2 species, it will be very difficult in the long term to survive. You will need a bigger gene pool to survive, and this is a problem that endemic species have, and this is why we have to protect them. And in particular, I'm going to show you a video of these 2 guys. So this one that you might be thinking, oh, I wish that I had it as a pet, but I'm glad that they are living in their environment, because they are safer there than with us, although they are very cute. And this one that you said, like, I'm glad that I have never seen this one. When I go to sleep in my pillow, I will be very scared. So they're going to talk about those examples, another example of endemic species.
But you ain't seen nothing yet. In fact, this next animal is kind of hard to see at all. The world's littlest lizard is a chameleon tiny enough to sit on the head of a match. It's only a couple of centimeters long, including its tail, and it's one of the smallest possible complex vertebrates on Earth. Its home is a small island called Nosy Hara off the northwest coast of Madagascar, where it was recently discovered in leaf litter and bushes by scientists in 2012. These guys are an extreme example of island dwarfism, a trend of isolated island species evolving to become smaller to thrive in a limited environment. The island of Madagascar has some other very small chameleon species, so scientists think that this especially tiny lizard might actually be the result of double island dwarfism. In other words, maybe the already mini chameleons from Madagascar hopped over to Nosy Hara at some point and became even tinier. Island dwarfism may have produced tiny lizards, but island gigantism is also a thing. Case in point, the tree lobsters of Lord Howe Island, a little spot off the east coast of Australia. Now, before you go imagining giant crustaceans leaping from branch to branch, I'm gonna break it to you. Tree lobsters aren't actually lobsters, even though they've got big, sometimes reddish exoskeletons. They're giant, flightless stick insects. Islands can be limited in resources, but that also means fewer predators and less competition, so sometimes animals that colonize islands become bigger over time instead of smaller. And measuring at around 12 centimeters long, these guys are among the heaviest insects in the world. Though these enormous stick insects were well known to early colonists on the island, no one had seen any since the 1960s. People thought that invasive rats drove them to extinction, but not all hope was lost. In 2001, scientists followed some rumors and discovered just 24 of them living under a bush on a nearby rock spire called Ball's Pyramid. Now, there's a colony of tree lobsters at the Melbourne Zoo, thanks to captive breeding. And eventually, researchers hope to reintroduce them to their original home, after getting rid of those invasive rats. You may picture most monkeys swinging through trees or living in forests, but troops of geladas spend most of their time on the ground, endemic to the highlands of Ethiopia. At one point, troops of ground-dwelling, grass-eating monkeys roamed most of Africa, but today, geladas are the last.
So here, based on the video, on the thing that I told you, try to answer this question. Which of the following is the definition of the term endemic species? A species, so let's go for A, a species that is native to a particular place and is found only in that place. So that is correct. Yeah, that is definitely correct. So let's see which one, if there is a better definition. So B, species that are found on an island. So this is only an specific. So all the endemic species are found in islands? No, so that is partially true. So this is not the best answer. It's only partially true. Flightless species of bird with relative or ancestor that are flightless. So this is an example of an endemic species. Yeah, some species they fly, they were able to fly to an island and they lost the ability to fly. So they start evolving in that island and they become differently and they become an endemic. That is true, but this is not the definition. So this is only a partially true. This is more of an example. The species that is sensitive to a shrinking population. This is a characteristic of a species that are endemic, but other populations that are, this is not the best answer. And E, all of these options are components of endemism. Not completely true. Yeah, the best term to define endemic species is A. Yeah, so based on the information that we already covered, this is the best answer. And so remember, endemic species, if you watch the video later to study that Rachel Cross recorded, she will give you an example of this bird. And this bird is super interesting. As I told you before, you know, these wings, they are not useful anymore for flying. So how do we explain that they exist? So it's when we compare those birds to the one that they were in the continent, this one they live in an island, it seems the more parsimonious explanation, and that you can compare DNA, and there have been many sources of evidence show that is that they were able to fly back and forth, and some of them they stay in the island because they might have more resources, and then as they have so much food there, they their wings start degenerating, you know, start changing, and then now these are flightless birds and they live only in that island and they look different from the ones that you had in the continent. Yeah, so they became endemic species from there. So endemic species, this is just an example, or species that are native or found in only one particular in a particular place. So here, best answer is A. The other ones, as I said, they are not as good. Why I show you this question? Because sometimes in multiple choice question, there could be many questions that are true or partially true, and you have to pick the ones that is the best answer. Yeah. And so this is something that if you know then the topic very well, you will be able to differentiate what is the best answer. So you already know so many things about disturbance. You already know and saw videos about endemism, and you know, so these two beautiful animals. Now we're going to talk about the categories of life. And this, again, this is very simple things that you watch in high school. I'm just going to cover it in case that you need just that somebody tell you again this story really fast in case that you forget, or that you are aware that you haven't studied it in a long time, so you can go to the Campbell Biology and read it again. So organisms are organized at different level of organization. So in the same way that humans, as we said before, we can say the most specific category to differentiate us is our name and our last name, but we can say that we are from one neighborhood, that we live in one neighborhood, that we live in one city, that we live in one country, that we live in one planet. You know, we can do something, create categories also to differentiate animals, to differentiate living organisms. And in this case, the most general one will be domains. And there are three main domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. And eukarya are the one that you know, yeah. So plants, fungi, and animals. And maybe did you haven't heard about this one that is very interesting? The protist and the group Protista. And here you have in archaea and bacteria. They used to be one group. They were just microscopic organisms that are unicellular, but in I think 1970, I will show you in a second, they were differentiated because actually archaea is closer to eukarya than we thought. Okay, so let me show you. So we talk about that the categories, the highest level of organization is called domain. So the largest category, the less specific category is called domain, and there are only three domains, and you can find it here: bacteria, archaea, and finally eukarya. And I told you that these two share a common ancestor, so they are closer, eukarya and bacteria, according to DNA analysis and the new information that we have. Well, uh, bacteria and eukarya and archaea, they share a common ancestor, but that is even older. Yeah, so these two are more related than the bacteria. And as I said, in the past, we thought that as the bacteria and archaea, they were unicellular. Yeah, so that they were the same, but now they were recently separated into different domains in 1970. So if you study from the Campbell biology, there will be many a longer explanation. This is something that you study in high school, and we talked last time that taxonomy is a field that study a classification of organisms, and to do that we organize it into nested category. So I just told you that the most general category is domain, and there are three domains, but you have other categories. And the most specific will be species, and then genus. And you have all of these categories. So here, for example, they're showing you that this is a species of a bird. Here you find all these type of birds, birds, of bears. Sorry, my accent sometimes even play tricks to me. So you have these three type of birds. So you have the polar bear, the grizzly bear, and different type of birds. Here in family, you will, in addition to bears, you're going to find other type of animals that are closely related. In order, for example, you now, in addition to that, you will have here other carnivorous animals. Yeah, this is the carnivora order, I think so. So you will have, for example, wolf and cheetahs, and in the class you're going to have, in addition to the carnivorous, yeah, you're going to have uh, other mammals like dolphins and zebras, and then in the film you're going to have the vertebrates, and in the kingdom you will have all the animals. Again, I don't want that you memorize this thing for the bears. I want that you think that you understand that there are nested category, and that the most specific are the species and the less specific are the domain. Yeah, and here you have This is the example of the black bear. That is, again, we will study this later. You need to have this, should be capital. Yeah, this one will be lowercase, and both are written in italics. This is a common nomenclature that we use with the species in the scientific word. We have is composed of two components, one here and the other one here, and both are in italics. Okay, this question is super easy. So based on what we just talked, there are three domains in life, and here you can find these three domains. So is A, B, C, or D. So here we just talked that it is called eukarya, archaea, and bacteria. So eukaryota, archaea, and eubacteria, or simply bacteria. Yeah, so prokarya doesn't exist. Animal, plants, and fungus, they are part on the so here of the eukarya, plants, animal, and fungi are part of that one. So this is wrong, and monera is an old type of definition that it doesn't exist anymore. So this is just from an old textbook. Okay, so A is correct and it's super easy. So here, this is another topic that you already know by heart, the difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes, and there are many. So if you want to know this in more detail, you can go into the Campbell biology, but pro means before, karyos nucleus, yeah, so here is nucleus. So this one is before the nucleus, and here eu and karyos is true. Yeah, it's a Greek root that means true, and here, so this one has a true nucleus. Okay, suppose that you understand here that it's a nucleus. Yeah. So in other words, the prokaryotes don't have a real nucleus, while eukaryotes have a real nucleus, and there are so many different. So here, if you see how many organelles do you have here, so many in the eukaryotes. In the prokaryotes, you have much less. In the prokaryotes, they are generally smaller, although in this schematic you cannot see it. They are, I think this one are 10 times bigger in many cases, although there's variation, but this is the idea. Here the DNA is going to be is going to be circular DNA, while this one is going to be all put it into chromosomes and properly wrap. Why? Because this one is very long in the one in eukaryotes, while the one in prokaryotes is circular because it's very small. And if you see it here, although it's circular, they wrap it and try to make it to put it in the best way. And there are many differences. Yeah. However, the thing that I want that you remember the most are that the presence or absence of nucleus. So here you can see some difference. They could be more. So the one that is super easy, the eukaryotes, they have nucleus, while this one don't have nucleus. These one are other things that are I talk is that these one are much larger than these ones. Yeah, this one have linear DNA that is packed into chromosome. This one will have circular DNA, and here you can find more differences for you to study. Here you can see a question that is pretty easy. They're asking you based on what we just studied, what is the key difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes? Eukaryotes are smaller. This is wrong. Eukaryotes have a true nucleus. That is the best answer. So far, prokaryotes are bacteria, and eukaryotes are not. Prokaryotes are bacteria. Yes, but archaea, they are also lack of nucleus, so this is incomplete. Yeah, so it's not completely true. B is better. And now let's go to D. Prokaryotes have organelles. This is Not completely true. The ones that have more organelles and the organelles are better differentiated are eukaryotes. So this is not, none of the above is true. That is incorrect. So super easy, best answer will be B. So definitely B is the easiest one. So this was a very easy question. However, highly recommended. If you feel lost, this is the right time to go and read the Campbell Biology if you haven't studied this in a long time. Also, if you want to get an A+, please go to the Campbell Biology. So there they explain more things. Yeah, again, the Campbell Biology, there's a PDF that I add in this section that you can read it. That is this first chapter of the Campbell Biology that cover not only a scientific method, but all these things about prokaryotes and eukaryotes. So we just finished the domains. You know that there are 3 domains, and we talk about the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Now we're going to talk about the difference between heterotroph and autotroph. That is a very foundational knowledge in biology that you need to know. So the question that we want to ask when we talk about autotroph and heterotroph is, where do we get our energy from? Yeah, so autotroph, they get the energy from a different place than the heterotroph. So in biology, it's always a good idea to know some of the Greek roots. And for example, I already showed you that with prokaryotes, before nucleus, and karyos mean nucleus, so eukaryotes, it means true nucleus. Here is also useful. Auto mean itself, so and troph means feeder. So the idea is that they create their own food. Yeah. So photosynthetic organism turn the energy from the sun and they turn it into chemical energy and they produce glucose using a series of chemical process. Okay. So autotroph, self-feeding, and plants and cyanobacteria are the ones that do this process. On the other hand, we have heterotroph. Hetero is other, yeah, and troph is a feeder. So in our words, it's us, people that eat autotroph. We are not able to take energy from the sun or from, we need to feed from other animals to be able to survive. Okay, so where do living organisms get their energy from? Some of them get it from the sun. Yeah, they create their own energy. Well, other ones we need to eat other organisms. So just to remind you, when we talk about autotroph, we generally think about trees and plants, but actually there are a large portion of bacteria, yeah, cyanobacteria that are also doing photosynthesis, like this one, and also algae here in the ocean. And the ocean is very important for the production of oxygen. Yeah, so we will talk about that. One of the main producers of oxygen in the planet are the ocean, while the trees that we have in all our forests are very important because they are capturing all this carbon. Yeah. But they don't produce a lot of oxygen. They just capture the carbon molecules there. So in other words, if we remove all the trees, we're going to have even more CO2. But to plant trees is not enough. It will take a long time to capture all the CO2 in all the carbon here in the different structures. The oxygen, actually the one that produce oxygen and capture more CO2 are these are bacteria in the sea. Okay, so I already told you that autotroph, they make their own food through the process of photosynthesis, and using that they sustain themselves. So they don't need to do this. They take the sun and they produce their own organic molecules like glucose. And well, as we cannot do that, we cannot use sunlight to produce organic molecules like glucose. We need to we get some of those molecules not from the sun, but from our organisms. And this is the main difference between autotroph and heterotroph. So heterotroph are consumers that feed on producers. Yeah. So here you have different type of heterotrophs. Some of them are herbivores. Yeah, that they mainly feed on plants. You also have omnivores that they feed in plants or in other animals, seeds, yeah, for example. And you also have carnivores that they only feed on other animals. And these ones are very important, the decomposers, and we are going to talk about that. Without them, we didn't have recycling of materials, and they are very important because if we don't have it, I will show you that in evolution when some of these ones um appear and evolve, there were extinction events because we didn't have how to recycle some of the materials. So that will be an interesting topic that we will talk later. So heterotroph feed on plants, animals, and other ones are in charge of decompose the organic material, like different type of fungus and different type of bacteria. So later we will talk more in about this in more detail, but there are different type of plants that are photosynthesizers. So I already told you that there in addition to trees, yeah, there are other photosynthesizers that are like cyanobacteria, but in particular plants, yeah, are there also different types. Yeah, so the most ancient ones that are still alive are these masses, yeah, that are very small and low growing plants. So they don't have vascular tissue, so they don't have a way to bring the materials to different regions that are very far or very tall. They don't have those structures, but they are very important. They are very important, especially accumulating water. You later in evolution, these organisms appear. There are ferns that they are also ancient, but they are younger. They appear later than masses, and uh, and this one were the first one that have vascular tissues. Okay, so this one no vascular tissue, yeah, and they are very low. This one start getting taller, and they have vascular tissue. Yeah, so let's put the T, vascular tissue. Here, the most recent ones are the flowering plants that are dominant today, and they have not only vascular tissues, but they create these flowers. And here you can see interacting with pollinators, and this is good for them because they not only give a present to the pollinator that is food, but the pollinators go and spread their seeds, or not the seeds, they spread their pollen, and they are able to go to different environments in this way. Okay, so we're going to talk about this in more details, but there is not a single plant. There are different type of plants, and some of them that appear long time ago, like masses, that they don't have vascular tissue. Some that appear later, that are like ferns, that you can still see them in different environments. In the Cinnabar forest, you saw many of them, and those one are a little bit taller because they have vascular tissue. And there are more, but one that is very distinctive, that is very important right now, are the flowering plants. That in addition to have vascular tissues, they have flowers, and this one is the reproductive organ, and those are very important for spreading into different regions. So there's an easy question. A difference between animals and plants is one, that animals eat other organisms, what plants generally do not do that, and that is true. Yeah, plants evolve faster than animals, and this is not completely true. There could be plants that evolve slower. So there are trees that have a very long life, while other animals that have a short life. So this is not completely true. Plants photosynthesize and animal do not. Generally, they don't do it. So here the best answer will be two of those answers, and all of these options are correct. So this is wrong. Here you have that these two options are correct, and we already talked about the difference between autotroph and heterotroph and the importance of photosynthesis. So this one will be correct, and this one will be correct. So when we talk about animals, this is a big group, and we're going to talk more about that. And in diversity of life, you will go into a lot of detail if you want to know more about this. So here you see that animals, when we talk about animals, we talk about animals of different complexity. So the ancient ones, the most ancient animals that are still alive are sponges. That those ones are mainly filtering water. Yeah, so they start filtering water, and there they have the specific proteins and enzymes that digest all the food. They don't move, and later these organisms that are still alive, that are very important in the ocean, that are the jellyfish, that those ones are organisms that are also ancient, but they are already are able to move, and they are definitely more complex than the sponges. And on the other extreme, we have, for example, not only vertebrates but mammals that they are not able to eat, but the nervous system, for example, is much more complex, and you have many more cell types. And so we're going to talk about many different type of animals, and all of this one, the only characteristic that they join this group is that they feed on our organisms. So here you can see also that there is a big diversity of decomposer, in particular fungi that are eukarya. All of them have this structure that allows them to absorb molecules. So they are heterotroph again, and those are called hypha. And you will talk about that if you're interested in more detail in diversity of life. And these ones, they have this characteristic that is very interesting, that they can be multicellular, or some fungi, they can still be unicellular. Yeah, so the yeast, for example, the one that you use for cooking or for making beer, they are unicellular. And again, there is a lot of more that we can talk about them, but in the diversity of life, you will go into more detail about it. Okay, so here, an easy question to finish this one is which of the following is not, just as a reminder, a category in the nested hierarchy that taxonomy is used for organizing life. Phylum, so we know that this one actually is true. Order, yeah. Genus, yes. Protist, and all of these categories are nested taxonomic use. And so the best answer here, it will be D. Okay, so you remember here, bears are in this phylum, that it will be the one that have bones, the vertebrata, vertebrates. Okay, and order is here, that are all these ones that eat, that are carnivorous. And here genus, it will be all the type of bears, yeah, polar bears, grizzly bears, black bears. However, protist is something completely different. Yeah, you remember protist is a type of single cell organisms of the kingdom Protista, such as protozoan and simple algae. Yeah, so they will be located here. Yeah, so here we find something that definitely doesn't fit in that answer. So in other words, which of the following is not a category that taxonomists use? This protist. Protist, it will not be a category of one of this one. It's actually a type of organism. It's like saying that bears are a category. Okay, so I hope that this was clear. And if you have any question, let me know.